Deep in the heart of Papua New Guinea, where the jungle grows so thick it feels like the trees are swallowing you whole, a young adventurer named Alex was on a mission. He wasn't your typical tourist looking for Instagram-worthy shots or someone chasing a quick thrill. No, Alex lived for the unknown, the kind of mysteries that made other people nervous just thinking about them. Over the years, he'd explored forgotten caves, climbed mountains no one dared to touch, and even stumbled across ancient ruins hidden beneath layers of moss and vines. But nothing could have prepared him for what he found this time. The journey started like any other expedition. Alex packed his essentials: a machete sharp enough to cut through bamboo, a GPS device to keep track of his location, though deep down he knew it might not work if the signal got lost under all those trees, and a small backpack filled with food, water, and basic supplies. The plan? To spend a week venturing into uncharted parts of the jungle, hoping to find anything that hadn't been documented before. Some people called him crazy, but Alex didn't care. There was something magical about stepping into places untouched by modern life, where nature ruled supreme and humans were mere visitors. For days, Alex hacked his way through the dense forest. Every swing of the machete brought him closer to, well, he didn't know exactly what. Mosquitoes buzzed around his head like tiny helicopters, biting every inch of exposed skin they could find. The humidity clung to him like a second layer of clothing, making each breath feel heavier than the last. At night, the jungle came alive with sounds: chirps, growls, rustles that reminded him how small he really was compared to the vast wilderness around him. Still, Alex pressed on, driven by curiosity and a stubborn determination to see what lay ahead. Then, on the fourth day, as the sun filtered weakly through the canopy above, Alex saw something that stopped him dead in his tracks. Sticking out of the ground at an odd angle, almost camouflaged by the greenery, was the tail section of a plane. It looked decades old, with its metal frame corroded and covered in moss. The wings were either missing or completely broken off, and the rest of the fuselage seemed half buried in the earth. Alex's heart raced. How had no one found this before? What happened here? He approached cautiously, pushing aside vines and branches to get a better look. As he circled the wreckage, he noticed there were no signs of rescue efforts nearby, no tire marks from vehicles, no markers left behind by search teams. It was as if the plane had simply vanished into thin air, only to reappear years later when the jungle decided it was ready to give up its secret. The cockpit door hung open slightly, creaking softly in the breeze. For a moment, Alex hesitated. Something about this place felt wrong, like he was intruding on a grave. But his curiosity won over, and he stepped inside. The interior of the plane was dark and musty, the smell of dampness and decay hitting him immediately. Pulling out his flashlight, Alex scanned the area. The seats were torn apart, their cushions long gone, leaving behind skeletal frames. Papers and personal items littered the floral notebooks, faded photographs, scraps of fabric. Whoever had been on this flight clearly hadn't planned to leave in a hurry. But then Alex spotted something unusual: a metal briefcase wedged tightly under the co-pilot's seat. It was locked, but the lock itself looked worn, as if someone had tried and failed to break it open many times before. Using his multi-tool, Alex managed to pry the case open. Inside, he found stacks of documents written in languages he couldn't recognize, along with hand-drawn maps marked with strange symbols. One item caught his attention more than anything else: a photograph. In it, a group of men stood proudly beside the very same plane he was now standing in. Their faces were serious, almost grim, and on the back of the photo, someone had scribbled a single word: Erebus. Alex had no idea what it meant, but the hair on the back of his neck stood up. This wasn't just an abandoned plane. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. As night began to fall, the jungle grew eerily quiet. Normally, the forest would come alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, but tonight there was nothing, just silence. And then Alex noticed something else: symbols carved into the trees surrounding the plain. They matched the ones on the map. Someone or something had been here recently. Standing there in the fading light, Alex realized this discovery was bigger than he'd imagined. Whatever story this plain held, it wasn't finished yet. And somehow, he knew he was now part of it. The symbols carved into the trees were like nothing Alex had ever seen before. They weren't random scratches or marks left by animals. They were deliberate, intricate, and repeated in a pattern that seemed to form some kind of trail. Each symbol glowed faintly under the moonlight, as if they'd been etched not just into the bark, but into the very soul of the jungle itself. It was eerie, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. Alex couldn't explain why, but he felt drawn to them, as though they were calling out to him, urging him to follow. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the map in his hand. The strange markings on it matched the ones on the trees almost perfectly. Whoever had made these symbols and whoever had written on those cryptic documents knew something big. And Alex was starting to feel like he was standing on the edge of a mystery far bigger than himself. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave this place and forget he'd ever found the plain. But curiosity burned brighter than fear. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The trail led deeper into the jungle, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. One moment, Alex was walking through a narrow path flanked by towering trees. The next, he found himself stepping into a clearing so vast it felt like the forest had opened its arms to reveal a hidden world. The air here was different, thicker, heavier, and the sounds of the jungle seemed muted, as if the wildlife itself was holding its breath. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone structure, half buried in vines and moss. It looked like it had been there for centuries, maybe even millennia, untouched by time or human hands. The structure was massive, far larger than anything Alex had expected to find in the middle of such dense wilderness. Its surface was covered in carvings, images of stars, planets, and strange winged creatures that didn't look entirely human. Some of the carvings seemed to pulse faintly with light, as though alive. At the base of the structure was an entrance, flanked by two towering statues of beings that were neither man nor beast. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions unreadable, and yet they radiated a sense of power that made Alex's skin crawl. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Despite the unease gnawing at him, Alex moved closer. The entrance yawned open like a mouth ready to swallow him whole, and the darkness inside was absolute. He hesitated again, shining his flashlight into the abyss. The beam revealed a narrow corridor leading downward, its walls lined with more of the same glowing symbols. Taking a step inside felt like crossing a threshold, not just into the structure, but into another realm entirely. The air grew colder, and the silence became oppressive, pressing down on him like a weight. As he ventured deeper, the corridor opened up into a cavernous chamber. The space was illuminated by patches of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the ceiling, and walls casting an otherworldly glow over everything. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on top of it rested an object unlike anything Alex had ever seen, a crystalline sphere, about the size of a basketball, pulsating with a soft blue light. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic, and somehow alive. Around the pedestal lay the remains of several skeletons, their bones brittle and yellowed with age. Each skeleton wore tattered remnants of uniforms, and their hands were frozen in mid-reach, as if they had been trying to grab the sphere in their final moments. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to turn around and run, to put as much distance between himself and this place as possible. But he couldn't. His feet felt rooted to the spot, and his eyes refused to look away from the sphere. There was something about it, something magnetic, irresistible, against every instinct. Screaming at him to leave, he took a step closer, then another, until he was standing right in front of the pedestal, staring down at the artifact. Reaching out, he touched the sphere. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a jolt of energy shot through him, and his mind exploded with images. He saw stars collapsing into black holes, galaxies forming and dissolving, civilizations rising and falling like waves on an endless ocean. He saw a shadowy force, a presence so vast and incomprehensible that it made his stomach churn with dread. It consumed everything in its path, leaving only emptiness behind. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision stopped. Alex stumbled backward, gasping for air. His head throbbed and his body trembled, but he was still alive. The sphere sat silently on the pedestal, its light dimmer now, as if it had expended part of its energy to show him what it had. Whatever it was, Alex knew one thing for certain. It wasn't just a relic. It was a key to what? He wasn't sure. But it was powerful. Too powerful. And someone else already knew about it. As he stood there, trying to process what he'd just experienced, he heard a sound behind him. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and accompanied by the faint rustle of fabric against stone. Someone or something was in the chamber with him. The sound of footsteps echoed softly in the cavernous chamber, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the space. Alex froze, his breath catching in his throat. The glow from the bioluminescent fungi painted the room in faint, eerie hues, but it wasn't enough to reveal who or what was behind him. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it an animal drawn by the strange energy of the sphere, or something far worse? Slowly, he turned around, his flashlight trembling in his hand. At first, all he could see were shadows shifting along the edges of the chamber. But then a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in rugged tactical gear that looked like it belonged to someone used to surviving in harsh conditions. His face was partially obscured by a hood, but his eyes glinted sharply in the dim light. Behind him stood two others, similarly outfitted, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex's instincts screamed at him to run, but he knew there was nowhere to go. The entrance was blocked by these strangers, and even if he tried to make a break for it, they'd catch him before he could get far. So instead, he stood his ground, gripping the flashlight tightly as though it might somehow protect him. "Who are you?" Alex finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. The leader stepped forward, his boots crunching lightly on the stone floor. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the glowing sphere on the pedestal, then back at Alex. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an authority that sent a chill down Alex's spine. "You shouldn't be here," the man said simply. There was no anger in his tone, just a cold certainty that made the words hit harder. "This isn't your world." Alex swallowed hard. "What do you mean? What is this place?" The man ignored the question and gestured toward the sphere. "That artifact doesn't belong to you. Hand it over, and we'll let you walk away." No harm done. Alex's grip tightened on the flashlight. "I don't have it," he lied, hoping they wouldn't notice the slight tremor in his voice. "It's still on the pedestal." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Don't play games with me. We've been tracking that thing for years. You think we wouldn't know when someone touches it?" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You saw things, didn't you? Visions. That's what happens when you interact with it." Alex hesitated, unsure how much to admit. The visions had shaken him to his core, but he wasn't about to share that with these strangers. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I just found this place by accident. I'm leaving now." He took a step backward, but the man moved quickly, blocking his path. "Not so fast," he said, his tone sharper this time. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. That sphere, it's dangerous. More dangerous than you can imagine. If it falls into the wrong hands—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "We can't let that happen." Alex's mind raced. These people weren't locals. They were professionals, probably part of some kind of organization. And judging by the way they carried themselves, they weren't afraid to use force if necessary. But why were they after the sphere? What did they know that he didn't? "I'm not giving you anything," Alex said firmly, surprising even himself with how steady his voice sounded. "Whatever this thing is, it doesn't belong to you either." The man sighed, almost as if he'd expected this response. "Suit yourself," he said, stepping aside slightly. For a split second, Alex thought he might actually be allowed to leave. But then the man gave a subtle nod to his companions, and everything changed. Before Alex could react, one of them lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm. Alex struggled, twisting free just long enough to swing his flashlight like a weapon. The blow connected with a dull thud, and the attacker stumbled back, clutching his face. Seizing the opportunity, Alex bolted toward the exit, his heart pounding in his chest, but the jungle outside was no safer than the chamber. As soon as he burst through the doorway, he realized he'd walked straight into an ambush. Two more figures emerged from the shadows, cutting off his escape route. Trapped between the ancient structure and the dense forest, Alex knew he was running out of options. Desperation fueled his next move. Spotting a narrow gap between two trees, he dove for it, crashing through the underbrush as branches whipped at his face and arms. Behind him, shouts rang out, followed by the sound of pursuit. They were gaining on him, their footsteps loud and relentless. Panic surged through Alex's veins as he pushed himself harder, dodging roots and leaping over fallen logs. The jungle seemed endless, its labyrinthine paths twisting and turning without rhyme or reason. Just when he thought he couldn't run any farther, he spotted a steep incline ahead, a rocky slope covered in loose soil and vines. Without hesitation, he scrambled up it. Using every ounce of strength he had left out at the top, he collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. For a moment, there was silence. Had he lost them? He strained to listen, his ears tuned to the faintest rustle of movement. Then, just as he began to hope, a voice called out from below. "This isn't over." It shouted, echoing through the trees. "You can't hide forever." Alex didn't wait to hear more. He forced himself to his feet and kept moving, putting as much distance between himself and his pursuers as possible. Every step felt heavier than the last, his body screaming in protest, but he refused to stop. He didn't know where he was going or how he would survive, but one thing was clear. He couldn't let them catch him. As night fell once again, the jungle grew darker and quieter. Alex huddled beneath a cluster of bushes, clutching the sphere tightly to his chest. He didn't fully understand what it was or why everyone wanted it so badly, but he knew one thing for certain: it was worth protecting. Whatever secrets it held, whatever power it possessed, it wasn't meant to fall into the wrong hands, and for now, those hands included his own. The jungle was alive with sounds again, but this time they weren't the comforting chirps and rustles Alex had grown used to. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves felt like a warning, as if the forest itself was conspiring against him. He stayed low, crouched beneath the bush, clutching the sphere tightly to his chest. His body ached from the hours of running, his muscles screaming in protest, but he didn't dare move. The voices of his pursuers still lingered somewhere in the distance, faint but persistent, reminding him that they were never far behind. Alex's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had just happened. Who were these people? What did they want with the sphere? And why were they willing to chase him through one of the most dangerous jungles in the world to get it? He replayed the leader's words over and over in his head. Asterisk, that artifact, it's dangerous. More dangerous than you can imagine. Dangerous how? Was it some kind of weapon? A relic from an ancient civilization? Or something even stranger something? Beyond human understanding? Whatever it was, Alex knew he couldn't trust them. Their calm demeanor hid something darker, something ruthless. They weren't here to study the sphere or protect it, they wanted to control it. And Alex couldn't let that happen. As the night deepened, the temperature dropped, and the damp air clung to his skin like a cold blanket. Shivering, he shifted slightly to get more comfortable, careful not to make any noise. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since before finding the plane, but food was the last thing on his mind. Survival was all that mattered now. Every shadow seemed to shift. Unnaturally, every sound carried a threat. Sleep wasn't an option. Closing his eyes for even a second felt like signing his own death warrant. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time blurred when you were running for your life. Finally, the voices faded completely, swallowed by the vastness of the jungle. Alex allowed himself a small sigh of relief, though he knew better than to think he was safe. These people weren't amateurs. If anything, their silence meant they were regrouping, planning their next move. He needed to stay ahead of them, too. Find a way out of this nightmare. Pushing aside exhaustion, Alex forced himself to stand. His legs wobbled under his weight, but adrenaline kept him upright. He scanned the area, looking for a direction to go. The moonlight filtered weakly through the canopy above, casting pale silver beams onto the forest floor. Following the slope he'd climbed earlier, he decided to keep moving uphill. Higher ground would give him a better vantage point, maybe. Even a chance to spot his pursuers before they spotted him. The climb was brutal. Roots tangled around his feet, and loose rocks slid beneath his boots, threatening to send him tumbling back down. But Alex pushed through, driven by sheer willpower. Each step brought fresh pain, but also a sliver of hope. Hope that he could escape, that he could survive this ordeal. When he finally reached the top of the ridge, he paused to catch his breath. From here, he could see the jungle stretching endlessly in every direction, a sea of green swallowing everything in its path. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how small and insignificant he was compared to the forces surrounding him. But there was no time to marvel at the view. He scanned the horizon, searching for signs of movement. For a moment, he thought he saw flickers of light in the distance, flashlights maybe. He squinted, trying to focus, but the lights vanished as quickly as they appeared. Either they were miles away, or they were deliberately staying hidden. Alex knew he couldn't stay here long. Even if his pursuers weren't close, the jungle was full of dangers that had nothing to do with humans. Poisonous snakes coiled in the underbrush, jaguars prowled silently in the shadows, and rivers teemed with crocodiles. Every step forward carried the risk of disaster. Still, staying put wasn't an option. He had to keep moving, to find a way out of this place. With the sphere tucked securely under his arm, Alex began making his way along the ridge, sticking to areas where the foliage was thinner. The higher elevation made it easier to navigate, and for the first time in hours, he felt a glimmer of control returning. He started marking his path by breaking twigs and leaving subtle signs, a habit drilled into him during years of survival training. If he got turned around, these markers might be the only thing keeping him from walking in circles. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alex stumbled upon something unexpected, a narrow dirt trail winding through the trees. It was faint, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, but it was definitely man-made. Someone else had been here recently. Whether it was the people chasing him or someone else entirely, he couldn't tell. But it was a lead-up potential. Way out. He hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. Following the trail could take him straight to his pursuers, or it could lead him to safety. There was no way to know for sure. After a few seconds of deliberation, he decided to take the gamble. Staying in the jungle was a death sentence anyway. At least the trail offered a chance, however slim. The path twisted and turned, leading him deeper into unfamiliar territory. Along the way, he noticed more carvings etched into the tree symbols similar to the ones he'd seen near the plain and the ancient structure. Whoever had made these trails clearly knew about the sphere and its connection to the mysterious temple. Were they guardians of the artifact? Or scavengers like the men hunting him? As the day wore on, Alex's strength began to wane. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and dehydration left his throat dry and scratchy. He rationed what little water he had left, sipping sparingly to stretch it as far as possible. His body begged him to stop, to rest, but he refused to give in. Every fiber of his being screamed that stopping meant failure, and failure meant capture or worse. By late afternoon, the trail opened up into another clearing. This one was smaller than the one with the ancient structure, but it held something. Equally intriguing, a makeshift campsite. Tattered tarps hung between trees, shielding piles of supplies from the elements. Empty cans and discarded wrappers littered the ground, evidence that someone had been living here for weeks, maybe months. But the site was deserted now, abandoned in a hurry. Alex approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. The campfire was cold, the ashes damp from recent rain. Whoever had been here was gone, but they hadn't taken everything. Among the scattered belongings, Alex found a map spread out on a rickety wooden table. It was hand-drawn, marked with the same symbols he'd been seeing everywhere. One section of the map was circled in red ink, with crude notes scrawled in the margins, final destination and coordinates confirmed. His heart skipped a beat. Could this be the key to escaping the jungle? Or was it a trap set by the people chasing him? Either way, it was information, and right now, information was power. Pocketing the map, Alex continued following the trail, his pace quickening despite his fatigue. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. As darkness crept in once again, he realized he was nearing the end of the line. The trail led to a cliff overlooking a wide river, its waters shimmering in the fading light. On the other side of the river stood a cluster of buildings, a village, perhaps, or a research outpost. Civilization. For a moment, Alex allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. He was so close. All he had to do was cross the river, and he'd be safe. But crossing wouldn't be easy. The current looked strong, and there was no bridge in sight. He'd have to swim, carrying the sphere with him. Risky, yes, but it was his only option. As he prepared to make the crossing, a voice called out from behind him. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." Alex spun around, his heart sinking. Standing at the edge of the clearing was the leader of the group that had been chasing him. His face was streaked with dirt and his clothes were torn, but his expression was as calm and calculating as ever. Behind him, two others emerged from the trees, their weapons trained on Alex. "It's over," the leader said, taking a step forward. "Hand over the sphere and we'll let you live." Alex tightened his grip on the artifact, his mind racing. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered. But he wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The leader's words hung in the air, heavy and final. Alex stood frozen at the edge of the cliff, the sphere clutched tightly to his chest. The river roared below, its waters churning with a force that promised no mercy. Behind him, the three men spread out slightly, forming a loose semicircle that cut off any chance of escape. They weren't rushing him. They didn't need to. They knew they had him cornered. "You've done well to get this far," the leader said, his tone almost conversational, like he was complimenting Alex on a job well done. "But you're out of options. Give us the sphere, and we'll let you walk away." That's more than most people would get. Alex's mind raced. He wanted to believe the man's promise, but something about the way he said it felt hollow, like a parent telling a child there's no monster under the bed while holding a flashlight aimed at the shadows. These people weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take what they wanted by any means necessary. And if Alex handed over the sphere now, he'd be signing away whatever slim chance humanity might have of keeping its power in check. "I don't trust you," Alex said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. "You think? I'm just going to hand this over after everything you've done?" The leader smirked as if Alex's defiance amused him. "Fair enough. But understand this, you're not the hero of this story. You're just a guy who stumbled into something bigger than he can handle. Handing it over doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart." Alex didn't respond. His eyes darted between the men, searching for an opening, a weakness he could exploit. The two flanking figures held their weapons loosely, their attention divided between Alex and the leader. If he acted fast, maybe, just maybe, he could create enough chaos to slip past them. But even then, the river loomed below, its rapids promising certain death if he misjudged the jump. Time seemed to slow as Alex weighed his choices. On one side was surrender, a guaranteed loss but a slim chance at survival. On the other was resistance, a risky gamble with odds stacked heavily against him. He glanced down at the sphere, its faint blue glow pulsing rhythmically, almost as if it were alive. Whatever it was, wherever it came from, it wasn't meant to fall into human hands, not yet anyway. And certainly not into their hands. Fine. Alex said suddenly, his voice loud enough to echo off the rocks around him. "Take it." For a brief moment, surprise flickered across the leader's face, then Alex moved. With every ounce of strength left in his body, he hurled the sphere toward the river. It arced through the air, glowing brighter as it tumbled end over end before splashing into the water with a loud plop. For a split second, the world went silent, the jungle, the river, even the wind seemed to hold their breath. "What did you do?" The leader shouted, his calm demeanor shattering like glass. He lunged forward, but Alex was already moving. Seizing the distraction, he bolted toward the edge of the cliff. Diving headfirst into the river below, the impact was jarring, the icy water slamming into him with brutal force. The current grabbed hold immediately, dragging him downstream like a leaf caught in a storm. Alex fought to stay afloat, kicking and thrashing against the relentless pull of the river. His lungs burned as he struggled to keep his head above water, the roar of the rapids drowning out all other sounds. Somewhere behind him, he heard shouts, angry, panicked, but they grew fainter as the river carried him farther away. After what felt like an eternity, the current slowed, spitting him out onto a rocky bank near the village he'd seen earlier. Gasping for air, Alex crawled onto dry land, his body trembling with exhaustion. He lay there for a long time, staring up at the stars peeking through gaps in the clouds. He'd made it, at least for now. The next morning, Alex staggered into the village, half dead but alive. The locals were wary at first, eyeing him suspiciously as he collapsed onto the dirt path. But when they saw the state he was in, soaked, bruised, and barely able to stand, they took pity on him. They gave him food, water, and shelter, nursing him back to health over the course of several days. In return, Alex told them fragments of his story, careful not to reveal too much about the sphere or the men who had chased him. Some things, he decided, were better left unsaid. When he finally regained enough strength to leave, Alex hitched a ride with a supply truck heading toward the nearest town. From there, he boarded a bus, then a plane, putting as much distance between himself and Papua New Guinea as possible. By the time he returned home, weeks had passed, and the jungle felt like a distant memory. But the weight of what he'd experienced stayed with him, lingering in the back of his mind like an unresolved melody. Back in civilization, Alex sought answers. He reached out to experts, archaeologists, linguists, physicists, anyone who might help him understand the symbols, the visions, and the sphere itself. What he learned terrified him. According to the researchers, the artifact wasn't just ancient, it predated recorded history. Its energy signature defied known laws of physics, suggesting it originated from somewhere else. As for the symbols, they appeared to be part of a universal language, one used by civilizations across the globe thousands of years ago. A warning, perhaps, or instructions for something far greater than humanity could comprehend. Faced with this knowledge, Alex knew he couldn't ignore the implications. The sphere's power was immense, capable of reshaping reality itself. But wielding it came with risks that could spell doom for the entire planet. Someone someday might find a way to retrieve it from the river, but until then, it needed to remain hidden. In the end, Alex made a decision. Using the map he'd taken from the abandoned campsite, along with notes compiled from his conversations with experts, he documented everything he knew about the sphere and its location. He stored the information in a secure vault, accessible only to trusted individuals who shared his belief that some secrets should stay buried. Then he walked away, vowing never to speak of it again. Months turned into years, and life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be for someone who had stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Alex continued exploring the world, chasing adventures that paled in comparison to the one he'd left behind. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the sphere's story wasn't over. Somewhere, someone was still looking for it. And when they found it, the consequences would ripple far beyond the jungle. As he sat by a campfire one night, staring into the flames, Alex allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Had he saved the world by hiding the sphere? Or had he simply delayed the inevitable? The truth was, he didn't know. And maybe that was the hardest part of all, to carry the burden of knowing without ever truly understanding. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the trees around him. The jungle was quiet tonight, but Alex knew better than to trust the silence. Even miles away from Papua New Guinea, he could feel it watching, waiting for the day when the sphere would rise again, and when it did, the world would never be the same.